Palestinians. Tonight, as the Air Force was giving details of its raid into Lebanon, an estimated 50,000 peace marchers crammed the center of Tel Aviv to demand government action to end the bloodshed.
In the name of
longs for peace in the Middle East, but peace can only be reached if people will sit down and strive to reach it. Israel calls on the Arab nations to join with them in that search for peace.
In Palestine there was demonstration and a boy was holding a flag of Palestine. He got shot. Is that fair?
As international condemnation of Israel grows over the troubles in the occupied territories, Australian Jews and Palestinians passionately give their views of the situation on Vox Populi. Welcome to the program. Violence continues in the Israeli occupied territories, and a peaceful solution at this stage seems impossible, although both Palestinians and Jews in Australia would like to see an end to what the world has begun describing as a human tragedy. In two separate Vox Populi forums, the representatives of Australia's Jewish and Palestinian communities speak of peace, but they express totally different and conflicting ideas on how it should be achieved and what's important in the debate. First, the Palestinian point of view.
You show me how many times Mr. Hawke, how many times he come out and spoke right out about injustice done in South Africa and in many other parts of the world. And look at the big thing that they did when Colonel Mbuka did the coup in Fiji. And look how, hell break loose. And when the Palestinians, when the Israeli army tried to eliminate the people, the children, what the Australian government does? Nothing. $200,000, give it to the United Nations. $200,000. What a laugh.
How would Bob Hawke's family feel if he was a Palestinian and he got shot? How do you expect us to feel?
The situation in West Bank and Gaza Strip at the moment really, from our point of view, is very, very hard on our people living in the area.
هذه الحالة عم بتأثر على عملي اليومي. يعني يوميا أنا عمال بنتفض 20 مرة و50 مرة، شايف كيف؟ حتى بس أقدر أكمل عملي اليومي ومش قادر، لأنه أنا بدأت في مرحلة زي ما تقول كتير مؤلمة، لأنه عم بشعر مع هذه الناس، عم بشعر مع أهلي.
If you go in a demonstration and if you're lucky and they catch you without the media, then they just kick you on the head, open your head until you're dead, and they just throw you in the street, pretend that nothing happened. I mean, the stories that they told us, there is a woman, she said that she was walking in the street doing nothing, and because that soldier just walking from there, and because she has a Palestinian dress on her, and he had that special stick, he just hit her with the back of the stick, and just the lady went down because it stuck on her back, all the nails and the blood, and really down,
بعرف في شاب صار له شيء حوالي شهر ونص من مخيم جنين، وكنت عم بحكي معه قبل 3 أيام، كان عم بخبرني انه خلال الاحداث اللي صارت اعتقد قبل 10 أيام بجنين بنفس المخيم، الاسرائيليين قتلوا اولاد 2، واحد منهم عمره 12 سنة والثاني 15. ابن ال 15 انسان معاق بيمشي على عكازتين. اعتقد ذنبه حسب ما خبرني هذا الانسان القصة انه كان موجود صدفة بالمنطقة اللي صارت فيها الاحداث فقتل هذا الانسان.
مواطن استرالي فلسطيني له في هذه الديار اكثر من 17 سنة، ذهب لزيارة اهله، وليلة زفافه بالذات جاءت قوات الاحتلال الاسرائيلي واخذت العريس من امام اهل القرية الذين كانوا يحتفلون بزفافه. فسأل لماذا دعوني هذه الليلة فقط افرح في زفافي. فطبعا كل رجاءاته رفضت، فاعتقل العريس وهو استرالي الجنسية وسجن لا يقل عن 6 أشهر في سجون إسرائيل بحجة واحدة فقط، ونسيت إسرائيل أنه آت من مجتمع ديمقراطي، من مجتمع أسترالي ديمقراطي، بحجة أنه ظهر يوما ما في مظاهرة سلمية في أستراليا ضد بعض الممارسات الإجرامية الإسرائيلية ضد الشعب اللبناني والشعب الفلسطيني في لبنان. هذه هي الديمقراطية والحرية والحضارة الإسرائيلية التي تتغنى فيها إسرائيل والإمبريالية الأمريكية.
بتستلم مكاتيب، ولكن معظم المكاتيب اللي عم تيجي بتكون مراقبة من قبل جهاز الأمن الإسرائيلي حسب ما أعتقد، وبكون محطوط عليها شريط صمغي مكتوب عليه إدارة المراقبة. فمعظم الرسائل اللي بتيجي كلها بتكون مراقبة، ووصول الرسائل قليل متقطعة 6 شهور 7 شهور أحيانا 3 شهور. ففي مراقبة أعتقد على الأشياء اللي بتصدر من الأرض المحتلة كرسائل أو أي شيء ثاني من الأهل.
In Palestine now is a lot of unjust and inhumane things has been done. Is more and worse than what the Nazi done, which we are opposed and against to the Jewish in the war, in the Second War. Now the Zionist movement doing worse to us than what the Nazi done to them, because they're using the same method. They sieging us in the camp, there is no food, they're starving our people, and they kicking them, they killing them in many, many different ways. And I can assure you, they probably learned that from the Nazis.
In Palestine, there was demonstration, and a boy was holding a flag of Palestine. He got shot. Is that fair?
This particular demonstrations and strikes and stones throwing on the Israeli soldiers, means that our people, they can't accept to believe and to stay under the occupation, under the Israeli occupation. The Israeli occupation in our country nearly for 40 years. So the people over there, which is our people, they get fed up, they got suffer a lot, bitter a lot, and they can't live, they can't survive anymore.
أعتقد بند أساسي أو خطة أساسية دائما بالفكر الصهيوني بالحركة الصهيونية، سياسة تبعتها إسرائيل والأساليب اللي عم تستعملها يوميا، القصد منها هو إخلاء الأرض من الشعب، من السكان. لهذا السبب عم بتلاحظ انه حتى المستوطنين اليهود، واكبر دليل على ذلك الحاخام مائير كهنة اللي عم يسكن حاليا بمستعمرة كريات 4 الموجودة بمنطقة الخليل اللي انا جاي منها، يوميا عم يستعملوا اساليب متوحشة جدا، استعمال السلاح، الخناجر، حتى الدعس بالسيارات لأبناء الشعب الفلسطيني الموجودين بالخليل أو المناطق المجاورة منها. فالقصد من العمليات هاي كلياتها بدهم أرض بدون شعب، ولكن طبيعة الشعب الفلسطيني إنسان متعلق دائما متشبث بالأرض تبعته.
لذلك نرى ونطالب وبإلحاح وبسرعة من الحكومة الأسترالية والمعارضة الأسترالية أيضا الفيدرالية أن تهتم وتؤيد حق الشعب الفلسطيني بحق تقرير مصيره وإقامة دولته الفلسطينية المستقلة على أرض فلسطين، وكتجسيد عملي لهذه الخطوة الإنسانية المحقة بها جماهير الشعب الفلسطيني. نرى أيضا وبالضرورة أن تعترف الحكومة الأسترالية والمعارضة الأسترالية بمنظمة التحرير الفلسطينية، وهي الممثل الشرعي والوحيد للشعب الفلسطيني، لأنها بالتالي هي التي ستجسد عملية السلام في الشرق الأوسط بعد إقامة الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة على أرض فلسطين.
أعتقد أن إسرائيل حاليا أصبحت مكشوفة، وأصبحت الكرة بالملعب تاع إسرائيل، لأنه كثير من الشخصيات الفلسطينية سواء الموجودة داخل الأرض المحتلة أو حتى الأخ أبو عمار خارج الأرض المحتلة من كذا سنة عم بطالبوا إنه إحنا مستعدين، إذا بدكم سلام مستعدين نتحدث بالسلام.
The Israeli government and the PLO should just sit down and talk about it, and with their decision, if it's a good one, just live in peace.
The Israeli government pretend, or they are saying that we are a threat to their security. But in reality, if you look at the situation, you will find that we have no security. We are out of our land. We have no arms. We have not threatening to kill them. But on the other hand, they are the ones that they're killing us. They're depriving us from going back to Palestine. As a Palestinian, I can't go back to Palestine. But if you have a Jewish, Australian Jewish, he has all the right to go to Palestine and live as a first citizen in Palestine, where I am born in Palestine, where my grandfather, my father, born there. They raised me there, and I am one of the people that have left because of the 1948 war from Palestine. My security, where is my security? I should have been there, not here.
I became an Australian 12 years ago, and I'm treated as an Australian. I'm proud of it. I want the Palestinians to be treated as the same way as I am. I'm Palestinian, I'm Australian too, you know, I'm treated as well as everybody else.
مهما ابتعدت المسافات للبشرية فإنها ستحقق الحدث التاريخي الذي ينتظره العالم أجمع، وهو الإقامة المجتمع الديمقراطي الفلسطيني اليهودي المسيحي الإسلامي على أرض فلسطين.
خلال الحروب البشرية بروح ضحايا وبروح قتلى وبروح ناس كتير فيها، بس ما فيك تضل معبي قلبك على الطرف الآخر. بده يصير نوع من التسامح، وشعبنا شعب سموح.
نحن نراهن على مجتمع المتعدد الحضارات في هذا البلد أن يقوم كما وقف في الماضي حول حرب فيتنام، وانتفض الشعب الأسترالي في مظاهرات عارمة بكافة أبنائه ومؤسساته، وحتى بعض أفراد الحكومة الأسترالية وقفت وانتفضت ضد حرب فيتنام. نحن نناشد الآن المجتمع الأسترالي أن يقف مع عدالة قضية الشعب الفلسطيني، ويتظاهر ويساند ويدعم حق تقرير الشعب الفلسطيني حتى ينتصر.
Now, as I said earlier, the Jews, like the Palestinians, speak of peace. Naturally, they want peace. Who doesn't? But how do they think it should be achieved?
Since the beginning of history, there have been refugees. And since the beginning of history, refugees have been absorbed by other countries. I think only in the Arab world that the refugees haven't been absorbed. And I'd like to say to the Arab world, show true love to your Palestinian brothers. True love. Don't send money to the PLO for terrorist activities. Send money for your development as a people. Love them, absorb them. Israel absorbed the Arab Jews, the Jews of the Middle East and North Africa, and I think it's about time that the Arab world looked after their own.
I'm not sitting in a refugee camp. I'm sitting here because we started again. Why must there be that type of hardship? Because Arab nations don't really want to look at their own people and treat them like people and take care of them.
I was in Auschwitz. I was branded in Auschwitz, and I saw the ashes falling. I saw the crematoria smoking day and night. I was one of the few lucky ones who got out of it. How can the media or our friends in Australia compare what's going on today in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria and in Jerusalem with what happened in Auschwitz, which was a camp where people were absolutely murdered? 1.5 million children in Auschwitz, 6 million altogether were murdered. It was a situation which cannot be compared to the one which, absolutely not, with the one which is existing now. We had nowhere to go, and we couldn't turn anywhere until in 1948 the State of Israel was established, and people now God forbid it should be necessary anywhere in the world, have got a country of their own to go to. But to compare the Holocaust with the events which are filmed now in Israel are absolutely absurd and particularly painful to me.
No one's denying that there are beatings, but it has to be remembered that these are in the minority. You're only seeing a minority event because that is something that is good to look at. No one wants to see troops subjugating people quietly. And the thing that must be remembered is that we are seeing it. When 400 people were gunned down in Mecca a year ago, no TV cameras were allowed in. When England went to war in the Falkland Islands, no TV cameras were allowed in. And I think people have to sit back and say, hey, we are seeing the beatings. It's not being covered up. People are being court-martialed and people are being punished when there is this minority overuse of power by Israeli soldiers.
It is true that when one sees a 10-year-old child being beaten by Israeli soldiers, it looks very brutal and in fact inhumane, and there are no excuses for that. What we should not forget is, how did that 10-year-old child get to be beaten by the Israeli soldiers? He was probably in the scene of the action. Also, another thing people forget is that big stones can kill people. Sure, if one child gets injured, many countries of the world are willing to offer all the sympathies to the family, and I'll be the one to second them. However, who will offer the sympathy to an Israeli mother who is sending her 18 or 19-year-old child to the scene of the riots, knowing that although he will probably be stoned by massive stones that can kill people, he will not be allowed to shoot back towards the people, but worst comes to worst, only to beat them in order to save their life. And I think that when we do remember that these people are actually used as political weapons, the children and women being used as soldiers, one should not forget that the game normally played is that if the soldiers are trying to be killed, they'll try and defend themselves. Nevertheless, if a soldier does abuse his power, he shall be court-martialed. But that is not viewed by the Australian TV.
If I was in Israel right now, then the chances are that I could be a soldier. If not, then one of my friends would be. And that would mean that I could be on the West Bank faced by Palestinian youth throwing stones at me. Now, I could let myself be stoned, I could run away and risk the annihilation of Israel, or I could fight. Now, if I did fight, would that make me a thug? Or would that just make me a poor, frightened kid who doesn't know and can't solve a situation that he's been forced into?
I'm appalled at the attitude and the deeds of the Palestinians by turning young children and youth into frontline soldiers, into terrorists. And I'm appalled at the thought that maybe my grandson, who lives in Israel, may have to face a situation where a young person, a young Arab who has been brought up on hatred and violence, will want to do him ill, and that my grandson may have to defend himself under those situations. And I'm very, very sad about it.
As a mother of 3 children, I would like to make a plea to all the Arab mothers in the Gaza Strip and on the West Bank to think what effect this violence that their children are being incited to is having on their children. And I would like them to think in terms of peace for their children and for all the children of Israel.
I'd like to ask the Australian viewer to think about the children that have been sent into the front line. And I'd like the Australian viewer to say what sort of people send their children out to the front line. Golda Meir said, when the Arabs learn to love their children more than they hate us, we will have peace. That is a very, very tragic saying.
After 40 years, as Israel celebrates its 40th birthday shortly, it has never known true peace. Its soldiers are trained to fight enemy armies. Its soldiers have been trained to fight overwhelming odds, but its soldiers have never been trained to combat rock-throwing kids, and that is the tragedy of the situation. The rock-throwing kids and the fact that we have never known peace.
Gaza is only 60 kilometres from Tel Aviv. That's Israel's capital city. Now, that's less than the distance between Sydney and Gosford. You can imagine what it's like having 650,000 hostile people, or substantially hostile people, living in that area. The West Bank comes down in a long arc, which ends at some points 15 kilometres from the Mediterranean Sea. Now, you can imagine how dangerous it is for Israel, which is a tiny nation anyway. Israel fits into the map of Tasmania 3 times. You can imagine what it would be like to have a hostile population living unkept and unwatched in this area. A militarized zone in either of these areas, if that was established, they could easily just push and cut Israel in half just like that, and they could physically be the end of the Jewish state. It's a real problem. For Israel to sit down and talk to these people and to talk seriously about giving back the West Bank and Gaza and establishing a Palestinian homeland, the leaders of the PLO and the Islamic Jihad and the leaders in the Arab world have got to recognise Israel. That's why it's so important. The security issue is the bottom line.
But the truth is, every Jew has in his heart the land of Israel. Every Jew, therefore, is a Zionist. Zionism is not a dirty word. Zionism is our love for our land, and it's the only one we've got.
I think the media has to bear some responsibility for the continuation of violence. By calling the current uprisings and the current violence as victories, as Palestinian victories, they are actively discouraging moderates who are willing to talk and who are willing to have peace.
I know that there are many Palestinians that want peace, and I just wish that they won't be afraid and that they'll just stand up and they'll express their want for peace and won't be deterred by the PLO who are stopping them from expressing their wish.
In my school in Israel, there were about 1,000 students, and a quarter of them were Arabs. And we used to feel at home, the Arabs used to feel at home with us. We're like brothers and sisters. And what they're showing the Gaza Strip is completely, okay, it's a part of the Arab community, but the other part of the Arab community feels at home and regards Israel as their home, as their homeland.
There's only one country in the whole world where the Arabs have a vote. Do you know what the country is? Israel.
We're watching the beatings, but we don't see what provoked the beatings. We never have seen the stones that are hit on the soldier's face, his face full of blood, or his face cut with the Arab knives, but the camera comes in and shows us the brutal Israeli dragging away the perpetrator. I am ashamed of the Australian media because they have never, the photos in the newspapers and the TV cameras have never shown the action that provoked the retaliation by Israelis.
The other day in Melbourne, a Vietnamese man was found clubbed to death. Nobody got up and said Australians are brutal people. On the other hand, when an isolated number of Israeli soldiers behave like thugs, and of course there will be isolated people who don't act the way the rest of the society wants to, then the world's media gets up and says Israelis are thugs. That's not consistent.
On behalf of the 6 million of my brethren who didn't make it, I being the lucky one to stand here, I appeal to the free press in Australia to project a fair image about the situation in Israel, and to the cartoonists I say, please resist from depicting Israeli soldiers with a swastika on the helmet. It doesn't make any sense. Go back into history, learn the history, and you will see that there is a difference.
Different views, different opinions, and that's what Australia is all about, freedom of expression.